So I received an email that was asking about why you would have a positive FABER test and FADIR test in somebody who has either hip impingement and or hip impingement with a labral tear. And when you think about it compressively, we get the compression. I send you guys another video that goes over the compression that occurs with the FADIR test. But why would the FABER test be provocative? So let's start off by real quickly looking at the anatomy. So when I blow up this image here, you'll see that the capsule actually goes past the labrum. So this part here is the labrum, and the capsule runs past that. And that becomes important when we look at movement or when we look at specifically the FABER test. So I'm going to zoom back out, and down here I'm going to draw out our joint a little bit. I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, so bear with me. So here would be our femoral head. Here would be our acetabulum. And then here would be our little labrum hanging out there. And then finally, we would have our capsule, which comes past it here. So this is nice, happy, neutral joint. When we move that joint into opposite rotation, so now we're talking about rotating it this way, what will end up happening is that labrum ends up getting compressed because of the tightness that happens in the capsule. So it is being driven into the head of the femur. So it's a different type of impingement, but it's still impingement. In one case, the impingement is bone to bone, the femoral neck running into the acetabular rim, and the labrum just happens to be in between there. The other variant is that the labrum, as you are rotating away from its attachment, it now becomes impinged between the capsular border and the femoral head. So another potential with the impingement, even if there isn't a labral tear, is that will pull on the root of the labrum. So it can result in some pain or at least some load to that potentially aggravated acetabular rim. So that's one mechanism in which you would have that anterior pain with a FABER test for somebody who has FAI and or a labral tear in the superior and anterior aspects of the joint. Now, the other question that kind of came in there was, I've heard that if you have pain in the back side of the joint with this test, that's likely indicative of SI joint. And that really hasn't panned out, and we'll get more into that when we get into the pelvis and spine next semester. But what I plan on pointing out is two things. One is pain science. And if you have a very irritated joint, you won't have just irritation right here. The whole thing is going to be irritated. So you end up having a lot of positive testing with them, which is where I've mentioned in our groups that if you have somebody who has high irritability, you probably want to do the minimum amount of testing to ensure that they belong in your clinic. And then you work to decrease the irritability. That way later on you can test to get a better idea of what's not happy being loaded in relationship to whatever the activity is that the person wants to be able to do. So high irritability, all of these tests will be positive. So that it doesn't help you out with the location of anything. Now, when we look at other osseous changes, some other things can happen. If the femoral neck, there's femoral torsion, specifically if it is femoral version, if it's more specifically a retroverted hip. Remember, these like to kind of live in an externally rotated world to keep the feet straight. So if we have that, the distance between the backside of the femoral neck and the posterior aspect of the person's hip can also impinge when you go into a FABER test position. So that's one variant. You can also get thickening. You can still get like a cam lesion that extends posteriorly, not just superior and anterior superior. So it is possible for you to get posterior impingement. In populations where there's a lot of squatting as part of their resting posture, so more specifically some of your Eastern Asian countries where they squat a lot, then they're more prone to get posterior impingements or posterior labral tears, more specifically posterior labral tears. But this just gives you an idea that when we look at these tests, you can have irritability that makes the specificity of the test go down. You can also have a lot of osseous changes that make the specificity go down. And then, of course, you have behavioral aspects that can also decrease the specificity, which is why when you look at the actual research that's been done on the FABER test and the FADIR test, they come back as being sensitive. It gives you an indication that, yes, the hip is involved, but they're not specific. They don't tell you what part of the hip is involved. So, and again, for the SI joint, you're going to learn better tests for that when we get to that unit. So I hope this helps clearing up the situation. I hope it doesn't make you guys more confused. So far, I'm batting 1,000 with making things more confusing, which is not ideal, but I love you guys, and I hope this helps clarify things.